Hey there, folks. This is part 2 of 2 with actor and my former boss, Curtis Nelson. We get more into the specifics on this week, but if you haven't listened to last week, what are you doing? How have you not already? I know that all of you all are waiting by your phones and or whatever other device you use to just get a new episode of Service from Hell. So you probably have already listened to part 1, but if you haven't, go back because this episode won't make a ton of sense. And we get into some more of the specifics of working at the comedy club where he was my boss. So let's get on with the show.
So many times when I was security, it would turn out at the beginning of the night, I made eye contact with people. I didn't treat them like trash when they came in. I looked at their ID. I didn't make smart ass comments about their weight or their hair or their photo being ugly. Hey, how you doing today? Welcome to so-and-so, and then let them go in. And so many times that helped me later whenever I had to remove those people. I just went up and I literally had this one guy yelling at the security, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You were nice to me, so I'm going to leave.
That's awesome.
I'm the fourth guy and they're like, hey, so, but it just, a little bit of kindness and attention usually goes a long way.
Sure. Okay. So, the next question is how many customer service jobs have you had? And we listed 14. So you just listed all of them. So I counted 14. So of those customer service jobs, because obviously being an actor would be your favorite, but what's your favorite of the jobs we've listed?
Well, the Comedy Store security was the greatest security job I ever had, and the managing job I ever had. Those jobs are the best. I mean, it was also the most miserable sometimes, but working at the Comedy Store was incredible. I mean, you got to watch as an artist. It always blew my mind that I was sitting at a place that really, really coveted artistry and wanted people to be able to succeed in their art. And they gave them the opportunity to. And that's something as an actor you really never had. The biggest thing as an actor is you kind of have never, listen, being in an acting class is not practicing. It's like you sitting at home and playing your guitar and then expecting that you're going to be able to go on stage one day and be like, "Bow," and you just be natural Led Zeppelin, and you're like, you're not. You have to, and actors in film, you don't have that opportunity. Mm-hmm. You either succeed or fail, or you just don't know anything about the job.
Well, that's what they say, that phrase, get it on its feet. If you don't ever get it on its feet, then you actually don't know how well you would do. And I never thought about that. You're right, that performing live comedy is on its feet. You're getting immediate direct feedback. And that is...
And so it was fantastic. I mean, I would literally, I'll admit this now, I would sometimes be in tears in the back of the room watching sometimes. I'm like, and not of laughter, in tears of like, man, this is so fucking cool. I mean,
well, watching people's dreams come true never gets old. Like it just never gets old.
Oh, when they succeed, it's just unbelievable. Like, when Jesus Trejo's special came out, you're just like, oh, I'm just like, I can't believe it, and you go watch him live and you're just like, this is so cool. But you get to see these people grow right in front of you. And it was the most rewarding job for that one reason alone. I mean, I would, do it again in a heartbeat.
Now, you said that was the most rewarding or the best security job was at the Comedy Store. Why was that different?
No. I mean, it was the best managing job I ever had, or a best job I ever had. Forget about security. It was just the best job.
Well, why was security at the Comedy Store different than security at the Warner Brothers lot or Saddle Ranch?
Well, the Saddle Ranch, I mean, there were fights that were on the Sunset Strip. And I don't mean on the sidewalk of the Sunset Strip. They're in the middle, right across from what's the famous hotel right across from
not the Andaz. I can't think of the name of it. It's right now a Best Western, but it's Oh no, the Standard. The Standard is what.
The Standard. Thank you. So right out in front of this, I mean, literally on the yellow,
in those streets,
2 yellow strips down the middle of the street. There's people brawls, and I'm like, I'm not going on the strip.
Hell no, that's not your.
Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. We saw crazy things there, and House of Blues, same thing. I mean, at the House of Blues, we're pulling 4 or 5 people out a night at a concert, and it's nuts, and they're throwing at you, whereas at the Comedy Store, because of its environment, you're allowed, and crazy shit happened at the Comedy Store, but you're allowed to kind of have a voice and talk to those people, whereas the other ones, there was just almost no talking, and it's just crazy. You had a lot of meatheads that worked with you at those places too, and they would put you in positions I didn't want to be in, and I'm like, that I wouldn't put myself in.
What does that mean? They would put you because they would run their mouths as security?
Oh, there was this one guy. I won't out him. There was this one guy at the Saddle Ranch that we were kicking this, and he was huge. This guy was enormous. And when you're that large, there's no reason to intimidate anybody. They're already intimidated. And I've seen this man lift guys out like a baby by their arms
Jesus Christ.
and carry them out with their feet dangling because he's that strong. And I'm not joking.
I believe you.
And that same person one day we were asking this guy to leave and he couldn't leave, and he was drunk but he was young and cocky. The guy probably weighed about 175 pounds, very fit young guy. And he's like, let me see your ID. Cause he was, for whatever reason, this guy had asked for his ID. Oh, he was getting his ID back from the bar and his credit card back from the bar. And so he dropped him. And I said, hold on, I'll get him. And as I'm going down to go get the IDs off the ground and pick them up, I hear this giant man telling this other man, do something, you motherfucker. I will fucking ruin you. And the guy wasn't being combative. He wasn't being combative at all. He wasn't talking back. He wasn't being a dick, but he was drunk off his ass, and he had said drunk things. But I just remember bringing the IDs back up, and I handed them to the guy, and I said, I'll be outside when you need me. And I just walked back outside because he's just egging this guy on. And I'm like, I don't need to be in this situation. It's just, this is ridiculous. So, and I felt it was very unfair too, because I don't like intimidation at all. And it just rubbed me the wrong way. So that's what I'm talking about with situations I would have never put myself in. Whereas I would spend time with people and be like, hold on. Okay. All right. We'll be out. And oftentimes my manager would come over and look at me and be like, hold on, give me a second, and I'd give him a hand and put it up, and then eventually walk him out. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I feel like, with enough of those situations, it's not, you don't get the high that I think a lot of people do out of, fighting or talking shit or working out their miserable lives on other humans. I think there is that style of personality. And I think that high, I don't understand when that's like, for some people, it never stops being amazing for them. Like they love the fight. They love the push. They love the whatever. I don't get my jollies that way, so it doesn't make sense to me when people do. And the best security guards are the ones who also don't get their jollies that way. They're the ones who are just like, no, I don't need this. I don't need to make a scene here because you're acting an ass. Like, I just need you to leave. That's it. Because the person that's being combative wants the fight. They're being combative. Like, they're asking for it. And if you're like, no, I know you wish I would, but I won't. So just, there's the exit. It sort of de-escalates everything. Whereas if everybody's hot, anyway. Did you ever lose your cool as security?
Oh, absolutely. There was definitely times where, it just goes past the point of reason, and then you're like, and that was probably the worst trait I have as a human being, really, in all facets of my life, is that if I give you a lot of room to be able to correct and then you don't, well then, oh, you want me to act this way, and then I'll act that way. But I go 100% full force all the way and embarrass myself sometimes because it's like, you want to be unreasonable. Well, I'll show you unreasonable. And, that's unreasonable.
As they say in the South, I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah. So, and that's probably the one thing. So I've certainly lost my fucking temper for sure.
And then do you like excuse yourself from the situation, or do you just throw the person out and then like...
That's the great thing about having multiple security at one job. Sometimes you can do that. You're like, you know what, you take this one and, let this guy do this. And then, but then, other times you can't. So, I've had women windmill punch me right in the face. Ooh. Just like, you'd see a little kid like Ralphie in Christmas Story, and you can't do anything.
That's assault.
You just got to take it on the chin and the nose and the chest and the face and everything else and just leave. And you're like, okay, you take this one, or you just got to find a way to get them out.
Yeah, so. It's such a, and boy, everybody's got that right to that edge. Like they really know how to push you at the Comedy Store and elsewhere, just right to your limit. So why,
because I would imagine managing the Comedy Store with the amount of personalities and all the servers and like, I can imagine that. You're saying that was your favorite. When people were coming at you and like bitching all the time, I mean, how did you take that in stride? Because I just couldn't have done it.
Listen, I failed at that sometimes too. But there was one time in particular, we're in the main lobby. They're like, you got to come talk to this girl that she's so mad. And she was angry at the show. She wasn't angry at her service or anything like that. She was just mad. They said this and they said this, and you should refund all my money and you should do that. And her bill was like $240. And it's like, so I'm like, I'm not refunding your money. This is ridiculous. I'm a liberal. And I had to listen to this guy talk about this. And he was explaining all the shit that she had to endure in her ears. And I'm like, man, this is a comedy club, free speech. I'm a liberal. And she would just say liberal. I ended up talking to this woman for like 45 minutes, but she paid her fucking bill.
I'll bet so, Curtis. Okay. Who won that round, lady?
Nobody did. But literally it was one of those things where her boyfriend was like, she was like, just emasculating her boyfriend right in front of me. He's like, don't you talk to you do this, you're not going to stand up for me, blah blah blah. She's yelling at this poor guy, and he looked exactly like, I guess if you wanted to be crass and say what a righteous liberal girl would date.
Sure. She's a hero.
And he took it all in.
Bless his heart.
She berated him up and down.
And then when the servers would come at you too and have a million things like they knew best, and like, that can be a difficult environment, because I think because it was so fast and so high volume and there was alcohol and personalities, and like a lot of the customers would be problematic, and it's just there's just so much personality in that building. How would you right size things when people would want to come at you?
I failed at that sometimes, a lot of times too. But what I would try to do is like, I like personal experiences more than I do public experiences when it comes to managing people. And, the hardest part is trying to turn off something that's going on while everybody's around, and it doesn't need to be dealt with at that point. So you would have somebody upset at you or saying this bitch did this or this fucking guy did this or whatever, and we should be dealing with this. You just try to catch them later and be like, listen, we're going to talk about this, but we're going to talk about this later. And I like to be personable and sometimes shut the door and listen to people. And, you just have to listen. And you have to remember that it is chaotic. And they are mad and they are behind the eight ball, and that other person did fuck them over, and that other person, isn't doing the right thing. And then you have to try to open your mind and not be biased to who that person might be in front of you that you might not like yourself, and go, all right, well, let's wait. And then also, like I said, just listen and pay attention. And you'd see that most of the time when you gave people time to breathe, they would come back with a better sense of themselves and let everything pass. But like I said, I failed there sometimes too, because sometimes you're in a bad mood,
Sure.
You have to remember that, it's like people all the time, talk about anger and frustration in the normal world, or driving around and in their car and they're yelling and screaming, but that's because they have the solitude of their car to be able to throw and blow up in. And you want to be able to give people the opportunity to look themselves, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And usually they would self-correct before you ended up having to have that final conversation later where you're like, okay, now let's talk, Kate. What's the deal? How can I help you? What can we do?
Well, you do a really good job of like holding space for, when, I've been at the end of my rope more than once at that job and have tried to quit and have, told you so, Curtis, like, I am done. There's no talking me out of it. You'd be like, okay, well, just finish this shift. We'll talk about it. And then at the end of the shift, I'm like dripping in shame. Like, I cried in front of my boss. This is so frustrating. Then I'm like, no, I don't quit. Please don't fire me. I'm like, I know you weren't quitting. You were just upset. And I'm like,
you had the best work face. I think you and I have the same work face, Kate. you just know it's like, you wouldn't have to say a word. Yep. You wouldn't have to say anything. I'm like, yeah, Kate's in the deep waters, I think, right now. You'd just be like, you're running around, your little hand gestures. You'd always adjust your glasses as you're going through the things. You're like looking for your next drink or putting straws in it. Hey, Kate, can I help you? And you just look at me. Nope. Up. And you just go on. And I'm like, all right, she's in the weeds, but she's going to take care of it.
Literally drowning. Don't even know how to ask for help. Definitely should have, and did not. But yeah, you
Or
did.
sometimes, so I'd ask for help, but nobody fucking helped me. So, and they leave the room like, all right.
Oh, I'm such a brat. Oh, you should have fired me so many times. Okay. So what was your least favorite of all of those jobs?
Probably, I mean, the least favorite was when I worked at Chili's for 2 weeks.
Okay, tell me about that.
For some reason, whenever I was there, I mean, I was actually a server there. I was, taking orders and everything else. I didn't like the structure of it. I didn't like having to upsell. They were real big upsellers. And if I'm going to be 100% non-biased, and excuse me, honest with you, not biased. If I'm going to be honest with you, I would say I would see at Chili's the same type of people come in over and over in those 2 weeks. And literally after like the first week, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to make this. There were some people that came in there with their families that would just eat like every day. Every day for dinner, they would come in with their family and eat the most horrid, worst food and a bazillion pounds of it. And I'm not trying to be judgmental here. You're just like, number one, how do you afford this?
Yeah.
This is like, their bill was like 200 every time, 300 every time. I'm like, number one, what does this guy do? And does he not care about the health and well-being of his family?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they would just devour this food like, jackals. And I'm just like, oh, but it was just, and people were just so rude there and they tipped terribly.
Yep.
Terribly.
Yep.
And I'm like, and this restaurant specifically was the only reason I got the job as a server is because I wanted to work into the bar.
Ah.
I felt like if I could get into this, because they had a really good bar and I would be able to work my way up there, but I couldn't make it. I was just like, I just can't do this, because you had to upsell and stuff like that. And then the things that people would say to you as a server just drove me up the fucking wall.
Like, what's an example?
And the entitlement of people just expecting you to wipe their goddamn ass for them.
Yeah.
Just me want to kick their teeth in. I was just, these people are horrible. Like, I didn't need to help them. And I certainly never want to be the guy that, think I need to take it out some, frontier justice by spitting in their tea or something like that. I mean, like, Jesus. It's like, I don't even want to think about that.
I'm going to use that phrase on everything. A little time for a little frontier justice.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 weeks, and then you were just like, I'm out.
I'm like,
here's my
fuck this
apron.
place.
Okay, so that was your least favorite.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the weirdest thing you've been asked to do whilst on the clock?
Weirdest thing. I don't know. I think maybe one of the weirdest things that ever happened to me was like, it's not, I don't know if it was weird to constitute the weirdness the same way you're saying it, but when I was working at a bar one time on the Sunset Strip, I won't say which one, it wasn't the Comedy Store.
We can do the math. This
guy from Iraq could barely speak any English, and he was in the parking lot and he was drunk, and I was helping him. And I was like, sir, you okay? And whatever. And he would look like he was lost. And he's like, here, come here, help me. Come here, follow me. And I followed him to the Sunset Strip right on the edge and on the sidewalk. And he just wanted to talk. That's all he wanted to do was talk. But he couldn't speak any English. But he was in the drunk place of openness, of where he wanted to share, I think, his own anxieties and his own beliefs and his own consciousness with me, because he worked for the best I could get out of his broken English was that he worked for the oil industry, and he was over here talking with oil companies here that are doing business with them there, and that he was disgusted with himself, and that that life was a sellout, that he was in a bad place, but he had to do what he had to do. And he was obviously very wealthy. He had like a black card and all this other shit and stuff that he had dropped in the parking lot that I had picked up. And you could just see that struggling with his own dealings of the oil business. Wow. And he just wanted to talk about it, but he couldn't express himself. So I sat there for like 30 minutes talking to this guy, and he's like, and eventually all I could get out of him was he was like, oil, it controls everything. We're fucked. We can't get out of it. And I'm like, so are you saying like people are killing people and stuff? And he'd look at me, he'd smile, and he'd go, I can't talk these things, but we're fucked. And he just would go on. And I'm like, this is strange. But he was struggling with his own inner demons. Wow. And he just wanted to open up about it. And why he decided to open up with me is just crazy. But he was that's the best I could explain it, because I could barely understand what he was saying.
Yeah, you hold space for that though. And I think that people know, I mean, I bet you've gotten into quite a few weird conversations of people just because you have like a calming sort of presence when you're in the zone. So I imagine he was like, oh, this energy registers with something I can connect to. That's pretty intense. What's an incident that ever made someone ask to speak to your manager? Not so whether it was related to something you directly did or didn't do, but was there something when someone was above you where the customer asked to talk to your higher ups?
In security all the time, because, they didn't want to leave or whatever. I'm not leaving until, I get to talk to somebody who's in charge. You're not in charge. You're security and whatever, and screaming at you. And so, yeah, I mean, incidents, I mean, there's not one with security. It happened all the time. I mean, it's just, that liberal girl, for instance, was one of them.
Sure.
But I was the manager.
You're like, you're talking to
she
him.
didn't want to, but she had talked to everybody else. I mean, so
Karen will not be satisfied.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of any one incident where, I just remember the look on my manager's faces as they would walk up. It's usually like they would tell you everything that person had said to them after they turned around and came to you and was like, they're crazy.
Yeah. I think as employees, we forget that, managers can also read the situation. So even if it seems as if they're siding with the customer just to de-escalate the situation, that the managers, like that you guys are paying attention and that you're like, no, I know that person's bonkers, but we just needed them to leave. So sorry, it looked like we were siding against you, but, and yeah, I've seen that. It took the Comedy Store job to make me realize that, where I was like, oh, right. This isn't some personal, you're a bad employee. It's like, what's the safest for everyone who's insane right now? Okay, she's being insane as the customer. What do we have to do to just get her to be less insane, or him, or whomever? What was the last straw that got you out of? And we know the Chili's job was just watching people slowly die because of their diets. But what was what got you? Was there like an incident that got you out of one of your jobs that you were like, because you mentioned you were fired from in cahoots. So what? Well, actually, there's a fired question. We'll get there. But what was there something else that was like a last straw where you quit?
No, I never. I always. I mean, the Chili's was the only one where I quit, where I'm just like, dude, I went to the manager. I'm like, I can't do this. It's like, this is not for me. It's not my gig. And that was the only one really that I just had a last straw, because if you notice through the past retellings of my jobs, I kind of always either had other jobs. And I didn't even mention that I used to, drive around LA and do drive-bys from a buddy that would do what is it called? Damn it.
I don't know, but we need to get real specific on what drive-by means.
I had a job for cash under the table with a buddy of mine who was an appraiser.
Oh,
back
shit.
When the housing boom was just going crazy, and he had so many appraisal jobs that he would have me go by and do all the drive-bys where you have to take comparison photos of the houses that are in the same price range as that one he was appraising. And so I would spend 3 or 4 hours a day just driving hundreds of miles a day all through LA, Orange County, San Bernardino County, and everything, while I was doing all these other nighttime jobs, sometimes even with my kids in the car.
The hustle is real. The hustle is real.
So I never really had to quit a job where I was like, fuck it, I'm done with this. But it was like with that one, with probably my where I said I was done was doing a fitness instructor. At the time I had my own personal training business where I was doing like boot camps and things like that. And I said, I'm done, because I just didn't like being an instructor anymore.
Yeah. I think there's a shelf life for that.
Because when you're a personal trainer, which is, I think, the number one personal business in LA, I think
probably
is, when you're a personal trainer, you always have to be fighting for your next job. You're trying to fight for clients. And I never was that kind of guy. I only wanted to help people out.
Sure.
I didn't want to take their money. I wanted their money.
Sure.
I wanted to make money, but it's my job, if you hired me, to give you all the information I could to make you successful.
Sure.
So I wouldn't hold anything back. I'd tell you everything. And at the end, I felt like I didn't want to be a salesperson all the time.
That gets tiring. That part of acting is hard. The constant push of selling your brand. Okay. Have you ever told a customer to fuck off?
No, I never really have told them to fuck off. I mean, I didn't. When you were in security, you didn't have to. And as a manager, I never thought that I ever would constitute a reason to do that.
That's impressive.
So no, I actually never have.
Wow. Okay. How many bodily fluids have been on you whilst you were on the clock?
Blood and puke for sure.
Thank you. Did you get puked on?
I got residual puked on.
Yes.
When somebody puked on a bar when I was a bar back, and I'm sitting there washing dishes, and,
Yep.
I had my head's down. I'm going 1,000 miles an hour, and all of a sudden, just like spray comes on me. I'm like, what? And I look up, and this guy just barfed out the bar.
Okay, to our loyal listeners who know that I bring this up a lot, Curtis marks the second guest. Carl Tart was the first. Curtis is now the second that has been through the hell that I have also been through. So, Mazel Tov, Curtis, that's awesome. You got puked on. Does that smell? Because I'm sure you had to get a lot of that powder. I saw you actually have to powder some puke before. Did you?
Yeah.
Does that smell get to you?
It's the puke smells never bothered me. People puking's never bothered me. I mean, I don't know why. I'm lucky, I guess.
Yeah,
but it
you
never
are.
bothered me. I mean, it's not like I enjoy it, but I'm like,
You know what? It's God bless your
I make
dad.
the same
It's
face as you.
yeah, but it's because you grew up, in a butcher situation. You're like, the nasty smells are part of my deal. Okay, good. So just now, when was the blood? Was it your blood or someone else's blood?
Oh, it's security. I've had blood on me several times.
Why?
Well, I mean, at the Inca Hoots bar, there was fights all the time. That bar, there was fights all the time. One of the best fight stories I have, I wasn't in, was at that Inca Hoots. It used to be it was a mall. It was like a shopping center, a single story shopping center, like in the old days. It's right off of Glendale Boulevard in California, if you know Glendale.
I do.
And it's no longer there. It's like a Michael shopping center and stuff.
Oh,
now.
sure. Okay.
But that used to have the old shopping centers where they would kind of intertwine with each other. And so like the only thing that was still open in that whole shopping center was the Inca Hoots. So in the exit doors in the back, one night, the sheriffs, the CHP, LAPD, they all hate each other. And then one night they were so mad as a group, there was like 5 or 6 CHP officers, 5 or 6 sheriffs, and like 5 or 6 LAPD guys. And this is 94, 95 maybe. And they were so angry that we stopped them from fighting inside the club. And by the way, that's 3 different groups. So they were all somehow triangulated their anger toward each other, but all wanted to kill each other, but all as a group.
Jesus Christ.
So we ushered them outside into the back where there was all the old vacant shops were. And we started taking bets as the 3 of these guys, like 15 guys, just went fucking at it and just like balls of the wall these guys are balls of the wall, throwing punches at each other. I mean, just beating the ever living hell out of each other while we watched and took bets on the whole thing and just laughed and just kept them from going back in the club. And eventually it got broke up by the sheriffs and the LAPD showing up, and they all got their friends out of there and stuff like that. It was funny. I mean, I just couldn't believe it.
But you got blood on you during that experience?
Oh, yeah. We used to have, at that, I'm talking about Inca Hoots in general. We used to wear like white shirts. So I was always having to buy new white shirts from guys just, getting in fights. And when you're a security guy, they're already fighting, and you have to pick guys up and, walk them out and stuff. And so, yeah, I get blood on me all the time.
Okay. Do you tip?
House of Blues too. House of Blues.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, there was some big fights at the House of Blues.
Well, it's like you can only serve people fishbowl margaritas for so long and act surprised that people are killing each other before you're like, we might have a part of this. Like, this might be our fault that people are murdering one another, for fuck's sake. Okay, do you tip?
Absolutely. I always try to do at least 20%.
Okay.
And it's the easiest math to do.
That's right.
And then, I try to do more. It's actually, with the new POS systems, I like them because, they put a lot of those over tipping bars on there already whenever you can, use the digital POS systems now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like that because it makes it easier for you to tip.
So you like the handheld kind of like at the table thing?
I do.
Oh,
I do. Whenever when they come by, because then I don't have to do the math and it's right there. But I don't always tip for like coffee and stuff.
You don't? Okay.
Not always. So I'm not 100%er.
Do you ever, besides coffee, like if you got really bad service, would you not tip?
It had to be really terrible, but when I was younger, I wouldn't. Okay. As I got older, I just tip.
What's a bad service that would make you not tip now as an adult?
They would just have to be just where they just didn't show up enough, and you had to ask more than once. There's times where you like literally you're like, I have no silverware.
Now, if you were at a place like the comedy club that we both worked at and you looked around and you saw like the volume, or you were paying attention, like would you pay attention like, oh shit, this server has 100 people to herself or himself?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, even whenever I was doing, like if I were at the Comedy Store on my own, I would see that stuff.
You had said people's like biggest complaint there was what?
Well, sometimes their complaint would be that, that the service, it's almost like they expected it to be like a restaurant where the person's only got 5 tables and that they should be making their rounds, every 5 minutes as to what, there'd be some people that would sit down and drink their drink immediately and be like, want another one. And you're like, we're still seating people, and this server's still in the back, and they've got 80 drinks to bring out to the rest of these 80 people. So, it's kind of interesting that they weren't aware enough to be able to look around and kind of see how everything's being done.
Would people be reasonable? Like, would you ever explain that to people that were complaining? Mm-hmm. And then would their responses be reasonable? Of like, oh yeah, I just didn't notice? Or would they say, I don't care, I paid this amount of money, I want this experience?
Both sometimes, they would do both. Sometimes I would go in and grab a beer for them. I'd be like, listen, I'll just grab you a beer and I'll take care of it for now. But this person is way too busy and you drink that one really quickly or something like that. But there'd be other times where they didn't want to get 2 drinks up front. Then they were mad that they didn't get another drink. You're like, but why hasn't she been around? Or why hasn't the server been back around? And you're like, that's why she asked you to get 2 drinks up front, because she might not be back for just 1 drink. Is for a few.
Well, and a lot of us came up with sort of a speech, especially when I'd be like by myself in the belly room, and I would be like, look, I just want to make you aware, look all around, see all of these seats. I'm literally the only one up here. If you're a fast drinker, I'd get 2 drinks right now. And then sometimes people would be like, all right, cool. But other times people would think you were doing it to like upsell. So they'd like look at you side-eyed and they'd be like, no, I'll just wait. And then those would be the exact same people who would be so pissed when you were then in the balcony getting all those people their first round, and they're like they're doing the like hand up like what the hell in the middle of the show, and it's like, bro, you knew the rules though. I explicitly explained them to you. I took time out of my night to make sure you understood, especially when they were in the front row, because it was like, you're gonna have, I mean,
they also don't realize the situation they're in. They're at live show.
Hello.
And you don't want servers walking around like, just boom, 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 boom. Like we could have put 15 servers on and had only 10 people, but now the audience would look like a bunch of ants moving around.
Yeah.
Because you would just have them intertwined all the time. So, you were watching a live comedy show where, it was expected that everybody be paying attention to the show.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So we already know the answer to this, but you can tell a story. Were you ever fired from a customer service job?
Yeah, I was fired from In Cahoots.
What happened there?
It was the manager was friends with another DJ that had moved to another club, which is the reason I got the job. I got the job as the DJ full time because he decided that he didn't want to work at that club. He wanted to work at another club. So when he lost his job at the other club, he had stayed good friends with our manager, and they made up some excuse or something like that Haley was in the booth with me and stuff. And which is so funny later, like about 2 months later, I'd go into the club every once in a while, and he would have like 5 people in the DJ booth with him, and he'd be doing shots and everything else. I'm like, wait a minute. So my girlfriend that was in this giant booth with me, sitting over there, not drinking, just kind of hanging out, wasn't distracting me at all, was somehow distracting. I don't understand that. So, and then they also blamed it on like because I was ahead of sound and lighting for them too.
Oh, wow.
So I was ahead of all the lighting that went on the stage, and whenever bands would come into town, I'd have to meet them there. Tim McGraw played there, by the way. I met him and talked to him and had whiskey with Tim McGraw before he was Tim McGraw.
I remember you telling that story, and I actually really like that story. Can you jump in and tell it, or can you tell it when you're done with the firing story?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But so I had to do all these things, and they had hired a new manager that wasn't very good and didn't know how to talk to people. And she was afraid to come and approach me about anything. And I go, can you name an example of something I did to you to make you scared of me? And she was like, no, I just can't approach you. And I'm like,
sounds like a personal problem. Me. Yeah. Yeah. That's on her. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, that was a tough one, but because of that, I had my DJ business for a while. So I look at it as a positive.
Yeah. Overall, who's the worst customer? Or like, if you can't think of one of the worst customers, give me an archetype example of like, what would be the worst customer to interact with?
the worst customers to interact with in a bar setting is just people that just don't know how to control themselves, and they expect that it's just entitlement issues, really.
I agree.
Most of the time. I mean, we all get entitled about different things. So you just you try to have an open mind and listen to them. But I mean, entitlement is probably the start of everything, whether it's you're at a restaurant or a bar or anything. Like, I'm entitled to stand right here. I'm entitled to not buy 2 drinks. I'm entitled to not sit down and shut up. I'm entitled to you serve me when I want to be served, and that's it. You're like,
Is that how it works? I don't know.
That's the big one. But I mean, there's too many to mention in that.
Sure.
You know? I mean,
and have you ever had anyone like scream in your face?
Oh, fuck yeah. Oh, yeah.
I wanted to ask this because I think people think it doesn't happen and that we are dramatic and making it up. And I've seen you be screamed at. So what's an example of someone like, why would someone scream in your face? And by the way, screaming is not hyperbole, actual screaming. Yeah,
actual screaming. Well, I mean, like that girl that I told earlier, the story about the girl that kept saying she was a liberal.
Yeah.
I'm a liberal. She was at 2 or 3 different points screaming to where I'd be like, you have to please keep calm because everybody in the showroom now can hear you, which the showroom was through a door and around a wall. and you're like, I mean, literally like door guys would come out and be like, God, can we keep it down and stuff? And I'm like, I know I'm trying to talk to her, but it was just like, that's one incident. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. And there's so many
screaming at you. And then of course, as a security guard, you get people screaming at you because they're trying to instigate you.
Yep.
Just scream in your face and you're right. They scream.
Yeah. And as a server, I've experienced that more than once because it's almost like they're trying to push it so that if you respond, they get the bill comped or, they get to create some scene or have some modicum of power. Yeah. And it's usually it's a financial issue that escalates. Like those girls.
Oh, those are the best when people just don't want to pay for their checks.
100%.
So they're being obviously indignant just because this is just incredible. You're treating me this way. And you're like, oh, you don't want to pay for your bill.
Yeah. Like, oh, I see you, boo. I see what this is. Yeah. See, I'm stubborn though. This is why I'd be a bad manager. Cause I'd be like, okay, boo boo, here's your bill. Like I would just be like, we're not comping this. This isn't, if it's a battle of wills, I'm here all night on the clock. So like, I don't lose time. Okay.
I got time. There's only a couple of times I ever took anybody's bill off. There was only a couple of times I ever did that.
What's an example of why you would?
Well, I mean, you truly did have a server that was doing bad things, or was being very indignant themselves, or actually told them to fuck off or something like that. Because it's like, you're like, all right, I see what you're doing.
Did you see that?
But here's what I did on both occasions that I could think of. I told them, I'm like, listen, I'll comp your bill, but you have to tip the server.
That's interesting. Okay. And so what?
I don't want to tip her. I don't care. You don't want to pay for your bill, but your bill's $200. Your bill's $150. If you tip at least $20, I'll take the bill off.
That's impressive because that maintains a good relationship for you with your staff. And also you made the customer somewhat happy by getting rid of a $200 bill. I mean, they can't really, yeah. Have you ever fired anyone on the spot?
No.
Would you ever?
No.
Why?
Not today. Not these days. Well, you got too liability, I think.
Okay.
I mean, if I just said, you know what, Kate, you're done. You just get out of here. And, it's easiest to fire somebody, like on, you also nowadays have to usually have your, legal team draw up all the final exit papers and that kind of stuff. So you just, all right, cool. And then talk with your team and
now,
this person.
Would you be covered, because I don't really know the intricacies of this because I've not managed, would you be covered if, say I was like putting my hands on a customer at a table? I mean, it was so apparent that I was wrong. If I fired
you?
Yeah, like couldn't, okay, because I was going to say, there has to be, okay, all right, cool. All right, well, do you want to talk any more about firing or anything, or should we move on to dessert? It's up to you.
No, we're good.
Okay.
Dessert.
Okay, now on to the good stuff, folks. We hope you save room for dessert. Well, in this section, we're going to have you tell the Tim McGraw story, but I'm going to ask my questions, the standard questions first. So what is the nicest thing a customer has done for you whilst you were working?
Notice me.
Oh, that is such an honest answer. That is so honest.
I mean,
yes.
When you get people notice you, I mean, this sounds like a brag, but it's not. But I mean, whenever I was security at at a couple of different places, but specifically at the Comedy Store, I had a ex-CIA agent had been drinking on the patio all night long, but not gone into the shows. So he saw me having to pull 2 or 3 different people out in this one particular night and listen to them, talk to them, have a conversation with them. In one instance on this particular night, this guy, I literally stopped him from getting into a fist fight in the main room on the second row while we pulled his girlfriend out who was totally drunk. And this guy pulled me aside and he goes, "Hey," he goes, "can I say something to you?" And I said, "Sure." And he goes, "I've been watching you all night long and you are just unbelievable at talking to people. You are so good at that. And I can't believe that you talked that guy down and you got him to," the guy came back and apologized to me and he shook my hand where literally we were squared up, his fists were up and he wanted to fight me. And he's like, "That you're really good at your job." And so that's what I mean by noticing you. And, I don't think about those things because to me, it was just another night, and you just try to move on through and, try to let things go behind you. So, yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing as whenever I'd see people notice the servers or anything in any of my jobs. And I'm a wallflower by nature. I mean, and that's probably why I feel like I'm good at security is because I just like watching people and guiltily sometimes I just like, look at this crazy son of a bitch. I mean, but that's just the way I am. And at the Comedy Store, I loved that. I was able to lean against a wall and watch people. Probably one of my favorite places to sit in the main room at the Comedy Store was by the speakers, by the stage.
Really?
So I could look out at the audience. Yeah, I'd look out at the audience, and if Rick Ingram's on stage or somebody that's crazy that gets obvious reactions like Anthony Jeselnik or somebody like that from the audience, the best view is the audience. So you get to see them. And when I worked at the House of Blues, you'd work in the pits and you would see people watching their favorite band and that band you might not know or anything. And you'd watch them and the way they would just look was not creepy. You could just see how much this meant to them. And I mean, when I say I'm at the House of Blues too, I'm 6 inches away from their face sometimes, but they're looking over my head to be able to see the concert. And you're just like, look at this chick is just enthralled, or this guy is just blown away by what he's witnessing right now. And he's so in the moment. That was awesome.
Yeah, and it goes sort of in line with seeing people's dreams come true, just unadulterated joy that you're like, oh, the little kid inside of that person is literally living their best life right now. And it's such that never gets old. I would totally agree with that. Okay. Well, or, even watching the customers who are getting roasted by someone like an Ingram who are going in and having a really good time and living for the fact that the comic paid attention to them and just like cry laughing. And you're like, oh, you're like, this is it. This right here. This is it.
Yeah. And that's the great thing about being at the Comedy Store. It was just, you never knew what was going to happen any night on that note. Because you never knew what you were going to see, but you would also never get to see. You would also know that this is not going to be repeated
ever. Yeah. Or my favorite were the people that would come in who were from out of town, who had planned kind of their entire summer around this trip and coming to the store and just being overwhelmed by the history and really appreciating the experience. Because I think to speak to your entitlement thing in the previous section, the people who are appreciative trust and believe. If I saw you being appreciative, I was about to enhance your experience to the power of 1,000 because you could take in what everybody was working so hard to provide for you. And if you were like, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much. And this is so amazing. And you could tell they would want to tell their story of why they were there. So even if it threw me off, because that 3 minutes can really throw your whole night off, I would let them tell me. And some of them would cry and would be so like, oh, this is everything. And you're like, oh, this is everything for you. Like, this is just to your earlier point. This is another night at the job for me. Like, I'm seeing the best comics in the world all night, every night, to the point where I hate it. Not really, but like, I could say their act to you. But for you, this is once in a lifetime. This is the first time.
I was such a huge fan of stand-up comedy, and I was such a huge fan of actually being at the Comedy Store that I would see that people would come and they would stare at the front of the comedy club. And there was this one guy one day, he'd come by himself from like Australia or something. He was just looking up and he had his eyes up, scanning the building, and he'd scanning, looking around, and he's looking at the street. He was like taking everything in. And I said, hey, what's up, buddy? And he goes, I can't believe I'm here, mate.
Oh.
I mean, he was just blown away that he was there. So guys like that or people like that, I one of my favorite things to do as a manager at the Comedy Store was to take people into the comedy club when nobody was there or we would turn the shows over.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like during the first shows, around the 10 o'clock when we would turn everything over in the original room, I'd seen that they were there early. They were on the patio. They were already there a couple hours and they were just having a great time. And I would grab them and I'd go, hey, you guys want to, and I'd already interacted with them, on the patio, probably something, talking to them. I would say, hey, you guys want to go see the club? And I would take him to the green room in the main room.
Oh,
and I would tell him the stories about Ciro's, and I would tell him what the club used to be when it was Ciro's, and that, Frank Sinatra used to frequent all the time, the Rat Pack, all these people, Bugsy Siegel used to own it. I would tell him where the trap door used to be in the main room back area. And this trap door would go underneath Sunset Boulevard. So you could get on the other side of Sunset Boulevard and escape the cops, and stuff like that. And they would just love it. And you can't, if you do it to the right people, they're so appreciative and they deserve. And so if they weren't dicks and they weren't assholes and they looked like they wanted to be there, I would do that all the time, at least 2 or 3 times a week sometimes.
Well, and I would say to people all the time, and I've said it on this podcast, you would be shocked at how often we were getting shit on all the time, that if you so much as just, to use your previous language, just noticed me or acknowledged or would pull me aside and be like, hey, you're working your ass off, and I'd be dripped in sweat, you were immediately about to get 2 cards to come back, because not only did I know you were going to tip well, but also you were going to make every server that ever got to wait on you feel like that. And you were, and just being present like that, trust that that will come back to you, especially in that environment where it's can be pretty toxic.
And you could bring people back to shows that weren't good or something like that. You're like, you know what, just come back. You know what, you wanted to see, or sometimes comedians would cancel.
Yep.
And so I came here to see Joey Diaz, and you're like, I know it sucks, but sometimes it's done. And then but at least I can give you another show, and cop them a couple of drinks. So.
Yeah. What's the best tip you ever gotten? Because as security, would you be allowed to take tips at any of these places?
People offered to tip me all the time at the Comedy Store, and I would always just point them to the door hosts and say, listen, if you want to, tip somebody, tip those guys. Don't tip me. I mean, I never took a tip of security at the Comedy Store ever. Wow. Ever, not once. But whenever I was a DJ, I had a rule at the nightclub. Whenever I worked there, I was like, listen, I would say this to people, I would say, they would just be adamant about me playing this song at this time. And I'm like, listen, it's the wrong time of night. I'm here right now. I can't take it all the way back down to Garth Brooks, Friends in Low Places right now. Just give me a second, and come on, man, come on. I'm like, listen, I can't tell you to tip me anything, but if you tip me $100 right now, I don't see why I couldn't put on Garth Brooks. And that would usually get people to leave me alone.
Hello. Yeah, they're like, I'm not pulling out $50 for Friends in Low Places.
A couple of times they took me up on it. So probably just $100. Nothing crazy.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, I mean, I'd play that song for that too.
And then I would always, and then the few times I did do it, I would say, all right, ladies and gentlemen, I would rip off the record and be like, this guy just tipped me $100 to play this song. So by God, I'm going to play this song.
I love the transparency of that. Everyone's like, nah, I get it. What's an example, or can you think of interaction with the best customer? Or like, what's an archetype of what would be the best customer?
Like I said before, appreciation and noticing it. I mean, because then I would notice them and noticing and be like, hey, I can help that person out and buy him a drink, give him tickets to something else. Or even whenever at the House of Blues, sometimes I would even do that. I'd be like, listen, if you want to do this way, you just come over here. And I'd show them little secrets or something like that nobody's supposed to know.
Yeah.
So, that's the archetype of a good customer is probably somebody that knows customer service.
Yeah.
And the grossest is whenever somebody's a terrible person and they tell you they're in the service industry and you're like, all right, bye.
Yeah. And that happens more often than not. Like, I'm going to take care of you, boo. I got you. And it's like a big fat goose egg though? Like a zero? Like not even $1? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And what's the best lesson that you have personally learned from working in customer service?
Listen, pay attention, and stay calm.
That's great. What's one piece of advice that you would give to customers who interact with customer service workers?
Appreciate humans.
Ooh, can you elaborate on that? What do you mean?
It's hard to put yourself in people's shoes sometimes, and I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier about be aware of your surroundings and where you are. You're not at TGI Fridays. You're at a comedy club, or you're not at a nightclub where there's bumping music all the time, and you just understand what the situation is you're in. And as far as the service industry, with even sometimes as a fitness instructor, you get people that were rude to you. and that had certain expectations, or they were just blind to what their own faults were. You're trying to help this person out and be healthier and everything else. And it's like, well, why am I not seeing any results, Curtis? And it's like, you just gave me your list of foods you ate last week. That's why you're not seeing any results. But I worked out every day last week. Yeah, well.
Again, it's not just how you're working out; it's what you're putting in your mouth. Okay. Well, anything else you wanna say on the customer service tip? That's it.
I'm good.
Okay. Well, how can people get in touch with you, Curtis? Can they come stalk you or see movies you've been in, or do you want to give out your socials? Like, what's the best way to get to you?
Oh, you could follow me at Curtis E. Nelson on Instagram.
Can you spell that for folks?
But other than that, I don't have a whole lot of Curtis, CurtisE Nelson. Other
than that, you're not really on the social.
Just my name.
The socials. Okay.
I'm on the social, but not in that vein. I'm on it just to participate and not promote myself, and I don't have really much to promote these days.
Okay. So after people hear this, though, the Comedy Store is not where they're going to see you in the future. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Moving on.
All right. Well, folks, we're going to drop your checks now. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to help us out here at Service from Hell, we'd love to have you subscribe, rate, and or review the show wherever you listen. It will help us reach more people that need to be schooled on the art of being kind. It will be catharsis for those of us still working in the industry. Also, if you want to support the growth of this podcast, amazing. Visit our Patreon at patreon.com/The Kate Gaffney. That's patreon.com/TheKateGaffney. And if you want to get in touch with us here directly at Service from Hell, send us your receipts to servicefromhellpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Remember, if you can't afford to tip, you can't afford to go out. So don't be garbage and be good to people. It's easier that way. Thanks, Curtis. This was so much of your time. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you're not my boss now and I can ask the probing questions.
I hope it was fine.
It was
great.
A good guest. You were a great guest. That's going to be it for us, folks. Good night. It was really great. You gave a lot of stories. I forgot about the DJ portion of your life. And I was like, oh yeah, I bet. Got some stories. I wanted to ask about I didn't ask the Tim McGraw story. Wait. Do you have 2 seconds? Can we go back for just a second? I'll insert it. Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
And finally, Curtis, I want people to hear, what is the Tim McGraw story where you knew him before he was Tim McGraw?
I didn't know him. I met him and had exchanged drinks with him as we did a sound check for a concert he did at the Incoots place. We would have live bands come in there every once in a while throughout the 90s. And sometimes we never got the huge acts, and you're never going to get a Garth Brooks in there. But at that time, so we would have new upcoming acts as they came up. And I was doing a sound check with his band and his sound engineer and everything else. And we just sat off to the side in the DJ booth while they were kind of doing the technical stuff that we couldn't be privy to. And we just started talking. And I said, McGraw, your last name's McGraw. I know you probably get this all the time, but are you related at all to Tug McGraw, the pitcher from the Philadelphia Phillies? And he kind of grinned and he said, well, actually, he's my father. And he didn't even find that out until he was a senior in high school or something, or maybe even after. He was an illegitimate child as far as he knew. His dad didn't have anything to do with him. And I guess his dad impregnated his mother somewhere on the road somewhere or something like that. So he didn't even know that Tug McGraw was his dad until he was an adult.
Wow.
And he told me the whole story about that. And we talked and I just told him how much I love Tug McGraw and everything. But I mean, he was just a good dude. I remember him specifically being kind of embarrassed to be a live musician. I mean, he wasn't really confident in his singing and stuff. I remember on a couple of the comments where I'm like, oh man, how did you get into music? And we started talking about that. And he goes, yeah, even some of my friends don't think I should be a singer and try to point that out all the time. But you could see that he was really shy. And the first time I ever heard Indian Outlaw was that night when the concert happened. I was like, oh, I've never heard this song before. And I was like, and I talked to him after and I was like, dude, I really like that song, Indian Outlaw, half Cherokee Choctaw.
You're like, my Oklahoma roots.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah. So he was a really, really nice guy. But yeah. So I also got to meet other guys while I was there. I sat and had whiskey with Mark Chestnut and people like that. So it was cool. But Tim McGraw, that was pretty cool to meet him before he was anybody.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Thank you for sharing that story.